Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's congressional briefing on voluntary carbon markets and natural solutions to reducing emissions. Our conversation today is part of ICCF Group's Energies and Forests program, through which we convene key members of Congress, administration officials, and key stakeholders to advance constructive, bipartisan policy solutions that support the environment. Our purpose is to explore areas of bipartisan consensus within conservation and climate issues. ICCF serves as an informal secretariat to the leadership of several influential caucuses here in the US and across the globe, including the International Conservation Caucus in the House and the Senate, and the Senate Climate Solutions Caucus. To learn more, please go to our website, internationalconservation.org. I'm Chrissy Harbin, our Capitol Hill Program Director. We have a great program today. We are going to explore the issue of voluntary carbon markets and ongoing efforts to reduce emissions in the agricultural sector. I'll provide a brief roadmap and then we'll jump right in. First, we are grateful to be joined live today with Congressman G.T. Thompson, the ranking member on the House Agriculture Committee, representing the 15th District of Pennsylvania in the House Agriculture Committee. He has been working hard in the House to find ways to empower American farmers and ranchers in reducing emissions. Second, we'll convene a conversation with 3 experts who have significant experience in carbon markets and working with the Agricultural Committee. We have Jeremy Manion with Arbor Day Foundation, Chandler Van Voorhis with ACRE Investments, and Christine Cadigan with the American Forest Foundation. We look forward to hearing their perspectives and insights. Many thanks to everyone for participating today. To begin, I'm delighted to introduce our distinguished speaker, Congressman Glenn G.T. Thompson of Pennsylvania. As the Republican leader of the House Agriculture Committee and a senior member of the Education and Labor Committee, Congressman Thompson is in a key position to work with his Republican and Democratic colleagues in the House to advance sound policies. This past month, Congressman Thompson worked alongside House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy and many others within the conference to introduce a series of bills proposing natural solutions to reduce greenhouse gases and conserve the environment. While this package was a Republican-led effort, it includes a myriad number of provisions that find support among Republicans and Democrats. Congressman, thank you for sharing your time and insights this morning. I invite you to share your perspective on House-side efforts before we jump into a fireside chat. And in the meantime, for those who are joining us live via Zoom, please feel free to enter any questions you may have in the chat box. We can draw from these during our discussion. And please include your name and affiliation as well. So thank you, Congressman. Happy to turn it over to you for some remarks.
Hey, Chrissy, thank you so much. Thanks for the kind introduction and the kind invitation to be able to join you today. And thank you all for the opportunity to be able to interact with you here and for your participation. You know, we're no longer debating whether or not climate change is real. The debate is simply how to best address climate change. And I'm confident, absolutely confident, that innovative science-based natural solutions with our producers at the helm, quite frankly, is a winning path forward. You know, reducing global emissions is what we should be pursuing. It's the right thing to do, and it requires smart, prudent, science-based policies. But I think it's important that we approach these challenges through proven conservation methods rather than rushing to new and shiny objects that may not accomplish our environmental goals. As we have pursued within the Republican House Agriculture Republicans, we really defined our principles first, and those talking points really address those. I've always subscribed in my work, whether it was BC before Congress, or certainly since for the 13 years I've been in Congress, something that I've coined the term of principle-based leadership. And that's where you define your principles ahead of time and you use that as your true north, just like the magnetic needle on a compass to be able to guide you and keep you on course. And when it comes to this debate, when it comes to climate, you know, the 3 principles that we have put forward and really is driven in the work that we've done so far and will continue to do. Number one, the first principle is you can't have a healthier environment without a healthier economy. You can't compromise one for the other. It's just not going to work. Number two, it needs to be science-based and truly science-based. And number three, we should go with what is proven. And those three principles have really served us well as we've come to the table with conservative climate solutions. Now, I am confident that this is with our producers at the helm, this is a winning path forward. What some do not know is that our farmers, ranchers, and producers really have been bettering our planet through the adoption of common sense conservation practices for years. Let's face it, agriculture has always been science, technology, and innovation. Now, granted, those first farmers, it was pretty crude and rudimentary, but almost out of instinct, they worked hard to figure out through trial and error how to do things better because they're very survival and the survival of their family dependent upon it. So agriculture today is very sophisticated science, technology, and innovation. The men and women who farm our land are the original stewards of that land, and yet some are going to give them no credit for all the advancements that they've made in protecting our natural resources. And it's even worse than that. Quite frankly, our farmers and ranchers have had bullseyes placed right on their back for providing us the food, the fiber, the energy resources, the building materials that they work so hard to be able that benefit not every American, but a lot of what we export, feeding people around the world. And so it's time we're working to peel that bullseye off and replace it with a new mantle for our farmers and ranchers. They are conservative climate champions based on what they have done and what they will do into the future. The 2018 Farm Bill is arguably the greenest farm bill ever and provides some $6 billion a year for direct conservation benefits on farm and forest lands. No, we don't have to sacrifice a healthy economy for a healthy environment and vice versa. Natural solutions work, and producers are part of that solution, not part of the problem. The Agriculture Committee has jurisdiction over the largest carbon sinks in the world, not just the nation, but the world. Our forests and soils, they are natural powerhouses that are just sucking carbon out of the air. And the beauty of it's manufacturing topsoil by which we can give new life and growth and do a better job of providing that food and fiber. With the right active management practices, we can unlock great potential to sequestering carbon in our forests and restore it in wood products. A lot of it, those legacy items that get passed down from family to family, and not only is that a legacy of history of the family, that's carbon that's being permanently stored within those forest products. U.S. forests alone account for more than 90% of sequestration in the domestic land sector, and that's according to the Forest Climate Working Group. The Forest Service has estimated our forests are currently sequestering 14% of all U.S. emissions, and that number could nearly double with the right forest management and reforestation policies in place. A lot that we put in place already in the 2014-2018 Farm Bill. But again, if it's science, technology, and innovation, it's not static. It doesn't stand still. We're looking for the new innovations. We're seeing what science shows us that we can do to enhance those practices on natural-based solutions, whether it's in our soils or whether it's in our forests. Last month, Agriculture Republicans did introduce 5 bills, and we're not stopping there. That's the first package we've done that harness the power of natural solutions to address climate change. And we're just getting started. My bill, the Sustains Act, capitalizes on public-private partnerships to help reduce our carbon footprints. Companies across the world have made commitments to lower carbon footprint, and many need proven and practical ways to meet those commitments, to get their sustainability credentials or their climate credentials, whatever, so that they can market and they can show what their intent is and their corporate intent. And that's a good thing. That's wonderful. The Sustains Act would actually help these companies uphold their end of the deal and make good on their climate pledges and allow the USDA to match these funds. I want you to think about this. With the amount of the gigaton of carbon that's sequestered today, how much more we could sequester with a good investment. And the beauty of the Sustains Act, that opens it up to companies of all sizes. So small mom and pops, medium, and the large organizations, large corporations who have been trending in that direction because they're able to do that. You know, small and large, perhaps in the carbon market, are going to have a harder time breaking into that. But this Sustains Act gives them an avenue to be able to invest in what we know is provides both a healthier environment and a healthier economy. It uses science-based methods or conservation practices, precision agriculture, healthy forest management, and quite frankly, it's proven. And the beauty of this, those that will benefit will be not just large land holders and large operations, but even the small farms will be able to benefit from the Sustains Act. You know, in 2020, under EQIP, which is just one of our many conservation-based programs, a great program. It has such a great impact on not just the environment but the economy. But we had approximately 80 to 90,000 contracts or applications that really couldn't be funded. That's how high the demand was. And so the Sustains Act would expand that significantly and open it up to farms and ranches, landowners of all sizes, which is a really real plus. The Sustain Acts would help companies of all sizes hold up their end of the deal and make good on their climate pledges and allow USDA to match those funds. Now, there are a number of other bills on the table for my colleagues: Doug LaMoffa of California, Rodney Davis of Illinois, Dusty Johnson of South Dakota, Ashley Henson of Iowa. Now, Ashley's not on the Agriculture Committee, but she's been a fierce agriculture advocate. And these bills incentivize healthy soils, precision agriculture technology, healthy forests, all natural solutions to climate issues, climate change. Now, adopting more targeted voluntary conservation and actively managing our farm and forest lands is the right approach. Encouraging that will provide the benefits to the soil, the water, the climate, and quite frankly, the economy, while also ensuring that the U.S. continues to provide the food, fiber, energy, building materials that all Americans rely on. Now, here, and let me just wrap up with this. Here are the facts. Agriculture productivity in the United States has increased 287% since 1940. That's incredible. Agriculture contributes less than 10% of all the United States greenhouse gas emissions. The United States has reduced more greenhouse gas emissions than the next 12 reducing countries combined. And through natural climate solutions, like I've been talking about, the U.S. has the potential to mitigate up to an additional 1.2 gigatons of carbon dioxide emissions per year. The research shows that today we're sequestering 6 gigatons of carbon a year. So we can increase that exponentially with the types of the approaches that we're taking. That amounts to that additional 1.2 gigatons of carbon emissions per year that we could mitigate. That amounts to 21% of the U.S.'s net annual emissions. It's been said that the number one thing that we could do to reduce greenhouse gases emissions around the world is for American farmers and ranchers to grow and produce more and export it. Mm-hmm. That sounds pretty good for the environment worldwide, and quite frankly, it sounds good for our economy. So the question we have to ask is, who do we want supplying our food and energy? Is it the most efficient, low emission producer that creates jobs in America, or the higher emitting sources that create jobs overseas? And if you care about the American farmer as well as addressing the climate change, I think the answer is pretty obvious. Chrissy, thanks for the opportunity to be able to join you this morning.
Congressman, thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful to hear your perspective about the principles and also about the hard work that you and your colleagues are doing on with the recent legislative package. We have time for a question. I would love to get your insights on something that you touched in the latter part of your comments, which is on competitiveness. And I've heard you speak elsewhere about the importance of, if we want to reduce our global emissions, hindering US production is quite the opposite of what we should be doing. that we should be taking steps to ensure that they can compete in the global marketplace. And from my conversations with others, I realized that many sectors throughout our economy, from wireless technology to space technology to the solar industry, they're also facing very similar pressures. Can you talk a little bit more about what competitiveness means for the agricultural sector?
Well, it's incredibly important. We from a number of perspectives. Obviously, let me just start, and I know we're talking environment, but I'll start with the economy, because if we do not maintain and expand that competitiveness, our farmers and ranchers, have a difficult time. They need those. They need sound domestic markets, and we work hard to provide the right types of policies to grow those, to encourage innovative use of agriculture commodities here at home, to make sure we're providing access to the most affordable, highest quality, and safest food supply anywhere in the world for our families here in this country. At the same time, it's basic economics, it's supply and demand, right? And so we need to be fostering, from an economic perspective, those foreign markets. We had some great starts in the past couple of years with China, and also with a redo of the agreement with Mexico and Canada. Overall, those were great for agriculture commodities. And you think about it from from an environmental perspective. Let's look at China with the amount of emissions there, and on how they do their energy production, on how it just, the state of that nation. The more that, and it's not just China, it's around the world. We're such an innovator because of our productivity, because of how we embrace science, technology, and innovation when it comes to growing our food, our raising our livestock, providing the resources that we need to have, our timber. I'm privileged in my district to have some of the most highly valued hardwoods in the world. It's great domestically, and they have a great foreign market, and we manage our forests probably better than most other nations. So they actually are great carbon sinks, as well as providing that economic value. So we need to be working on trade and leaning into trade policy to expand those markets. That'll certainly have economic benefits, but it has environmental benefits that are significant. So there's a lot of reasons, and important reasons, why we need to be looking at making sure that we keep American farmers and ranchers competitive. And unfortunately, with some of the alternative proposals that put out there of taking agriculture lands and letting them sit fallow, or repurposing them for other things other than agriculture, that's just counterintuitive, number one, to a good rural economy. And quite frankly, it's not good for the environment, because you start making constructions and putting even putting like solar panels on them, you reduce the sequestration ability. You lose all that, and eventually it'll become a carbon emitter as those lands are allowed to sit fallow, and the root growth dies because of the construction over it, or is replaced. And so there's just we need American agriculture to remain competitive. It's good for economic reasons, but it's certainly good for environmental reasons as well.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more. Well, while I have you, I'd like to squeeze in one more quick question. Sure. Before we move to our expert panel. I want to reserve enough time for them, where we'll dive further into a few more of these issues. But at ICCF, we're really committed to a bipartisan approach. We have members in our caucuses that we support are Republicans and Democrats, and I know you've spoken often about working across the political aisle. I recall in an opening statement that you had this past month, you commented on the bipartisan principle that on-farm conservation should be locally led, voluntary, and incentive-based. Could you speak a little bit more about opportunities you see to work with the other side in the space?
I think when it comes to natural-based solutions, and a lot of that is in the jurisdiction of the Agriculture Committee. The Agriculture Committee in the United States House of Representatives has always had a long tradition of great bipartisan work. I'm a good friend of mine is currently the chairman, David Scott from Georgia. I've known David for 13 years. He is a gentleman. He's a statesman, and he really wants to work in a bipartisan way. I think this is one of those areas in terms of climate that we're going to be able to do that. I think these bills as Republicans, we kind of took the lead with this first package, but we're gaining co-sponsors on both sides of the aisle because of the nature of what we're doing. It is, it's voluntary, it's conservation based, it's proven, it's good for the economy, it's good for the environment. It's got all the elements of great bipartisan work. And Chris, I'll be honest with you, I've always believed that the only legislation that will pass and last is things that are done in a bipartisan way. No one party has the corner on the best ideas, no one individual. And so in terms of the spirit of problem solving, I've always tried in my leadership to bring everybody to the table. I don't ask people to compromise their principles and values. You got to stand on those, but let's come to the table and talk about what we can agree upon, maybe not even what we disagree upon, and use that the basis for cost-effective solutions. I think we're doing that in the climate space.
Well, that's a refreshing perspective, and we support that bipartisan nature here at ICCF, and we're very grateful to you for sharing your time this morning with us and talking about all the good work that you're leading on the Hill. Thank you for being with us, Congressman.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, in the second part of our program, we are pleased to be joined with 3 experts who have significant experience in this space in reducing emissions in the agricultural sector. Jeremy Manion is the lead of Forestry Carbon Markets and Natural Solutions at Arbor Day Foundation, where his work is focused on accelerating reforestation and agroforestry projects that create verified carbon markets and forestry-based social enterprises. Jeremy holds a number of really important roles in this space. We look really forward to hearing his insights in the role that forests play in creating a secure economic and social and environmental future. We also are pleased to be joined by Chandler Van Voorhees. He is the co-founder and managing partner of ACRE Investment Management. This is an investment platform that manages a portfolio of companies that drive scaled impact into the restoration economy. Chandler is widely acknowledged as a leading expert in conservation and ecological markets, and he's authored many publications. He's guest lectured at a lot of universities, including Princeton and Yale. So we're looking forward to hearing from him on his perspective on restoring forests on private lands and the green infrastructure needs in the US to achieve scale. And then last but certainly not least, we have Christine Cadigan, who is the Senior Director of the Family Forest Carbon Program at American Forest Foundation. She has expertise in working with family-owned forests to fund conservation solutions with a special focus on climate change mitigation opportunities. So what a group. Jeremy, Chandler, Christine, very excited to be joined by you. We're looking forward to hearing your insights on this dynamic issue. And before we jump into a Q&A, I would love to hear your initial reactions from the remarks we heard from Congressman Thompson. Jeremy, would you like to begin, and then we can hear from Chandler and then Christine?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. And thanks for having me. I loved Congressman's comments. I think that my big takeaways were let's invest in nature and energy solutions that promote economic growth, grounded in science, have a proven track record, and leverage our current people and producers, especially small and medium-sized ones. And I think that's where we see this common intersection of trees and forests being able to accomplish all these goals. And there's just 3 points I want to reinforce. We need to be thinking at a systems level and having diversified portfolios right now with this mindset where governments and the private sector are acting urgently to accelerate the decarbonization that's already underway in the energy and transportation sectors, and also looking at the land use sectors for forestry, agriculture, and wetlands. Right now, land has been the second, land use change, primarily deforestation, has been the second largest source of emissions. And so that's kind of overlooked sometimes. And so how do we think about the cross-sectoral land use planning to where agriculture and forests aren't at odds with each other, where energy development and forests aren't at odds with each other, where we can actually then think about this broader system to minimize issues like leakage and unwanted social and environmental harms. this transition's already underway, led by the private sector, the energy and the nature-based transition across different sectors, the tech sector and Amazon and Microsoft, finance sector and Bank of America, entertainment companies like Netflix and Disney, even consumer goods companies like Procter & Gamble, and our friends at Delta and international oil companies like Shell and BP are all investing in these markets very rapidly right now because of the opportunities it creates for innovation, market-based solutions, the restoration of nature, and the investment into people and evening out imbalances that have been created over time. Mm-hmm. So secondly, scale. I think the Congressman highlighted the scale potential very greatly. And I think trees and forests, when it comes to carbon sequestration, are the best technology that's available. They've been doing it for millions of years. We just have to harness that power. And I think when we're talking about scaling these markets, the voluntary carbon market in particular, right now we're about 100 million tons a year. McKinsey tells us that, minimally we have potential to scale another 10 to 15 times over the course of the next decade, up to 100 times by 2050. And I think if we look at one slice of nature, afforestation, just in the US, our friends at Green Trees Chandler here, they're verifying about 1.5 million tons of reforestation carbon a year. We have the potential to get closer to 250 million tons a year. And so the potential is very vast, and we need to go quickly to achieve this on the proper timelines. Last thing I'll say is the roles that the public sector and private sector can kind of collaborate together to remove bottlenecks that prevent us from getting to scale more quickly, and also building capacity. The voluntary carbon market has been evolving for the last 2 decades, building infrastructure, building registries, building proven methodologies grounded in science with the proper safeguards. So let's not reduplicate that. Let's leverage that existing know-how. And I think finally, when we kind of think about the deeper impacts to people, I think we've found that when we focus on the small, medium-sized landowners, family farms, this is where we get not only the carbon sequestration, but the other benefits of biodiversity, economic livelihoods, improved air quality, water quality, soil quality. All these things can be accomplished with trees at the intersection. And I'll just stop with saying, we're at this unique moment in time where we can systemically change the path forward for our country and for the world. And I think we have the opportunity not only to restore forests, but to revitalize biodiversity and investing in people, because inaction is not an option right now.
Mm-hmm. I think that's wise words and a great scene setter. Chandler, do you have insight here as well? I know that
Sure.
Jeremy begged some of your work.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for inviting us to join this conversation. I think it reminds me of a conversation I had with the late former CEO and chairman of Duke Energy. He said there's 2 forms of IP in this world. There's technological IP, and then there's how you get to scale. The thing about nature is scale because it's everywhere, and trees and soils are Mother Nature's technology for removing carbon from the atmosphere and recalibrating our relationship with that atmosphere. And so I think the more that we embrace nature as a technology, the better. And the second principle is to really look at the landowner, the American landowner, as the first responder to the climate change. And what we need to do as NGOs and companies and governments and local officials is really to figure out, how do we organize that scale? How do we solve the bottlenecks? How do we take the areas where government can come in and help build capacity and velocity into addressing and achieving that scale? And I applaud what Representative G.T. Thompson said. I think his comments on the bipartisanship of that and putting the American landowner at the forefront is critical at this juncture.
Absolutely. Well, always great to be joined by another Christine. So, I know you have significant expertise in this area. You've been at your organization for several years, so would love your takeaways and insights from what's been said today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today. I, Christine, am left feeling refreshed by Representative Thompson's remarks, because I do think that there's a tremendous bipartisan opportunity. And I actually really I just want to echo something you said, Chandler, that landowners really have the potential to be the first responders in climate change mitigation solutions. And one of the things that Representative Thompson pointed out really well is that, not only do these folks have the opportunity, particularly those in his district, he pointed out he's in a very rural district with a lot of forests, but not only do they have the opportunity to provide us with solutions, but climate finance provides them with solutions too. So we're seeing that the opportunity to leverage carbon markets and to participate in forest carbon projects, for example, furthers a lot of our other forest conservation goals: wildlife habitat improvement, sustainable wood supply, certainly, and of course, as Representative Thompson pointed out, strong rural economies. So I'm refreshed that this is, again, a bipartisan issue, and that we can work together on something that we all agree is really important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for your remarks. I completely agree. I want to draw out one other point that Chandler had in his comments, which was that this isn't an either or kind of situation, that we need energies and forests, and that considering one under the other is kind of an antiquated perspective. I think this is such an important point, and wondering if you can elaborate on this for our Capitol Hill audience.
Yeah, no, I think for a long time and the term offsets has created this this misnomer that it is allowing flexibility for the company to make that transition to a renewable economy. I think where the vanguard of the private companies are out right now with all the net zero or carbon negative commitments that have been made is that they're looking at the reality. What is the number one most scalable, deployable technology for repairing what has already been put up there, which is nature-based solutions? And then how do we scale up the renewable energy side of things to lessen emissions moving forward? Renewable energies, that's all, they're only going to address the future impacts and how do we bend that curve down? Whereas scaling up the nature-based side can really work backwards as a gigantic carbon sucking machine, if you will, that can really deal with that. Unfortunately, we've been caught up for a long time. I've been doing these carbon projects for 25 years, and I've seen a lot of this either or mentality. It's renewables or nature, and really it needs to be and plus. And we need to stop the circular firing squad that goes on when we get into these debates about, oh, well, offsets are going to just delay the transition to a renewable economy. No, you need both, and we need them on scale, and we need it at a very fast clip. And we're going to have to do that by building capacity into it. Christine's absolutely right. There needs to be more velocity in the financing side. There's bottlenecks, at least on our reforestation side. There's bottlenecks in the nursery infrastructure, and one of the bills that got put out by Representative Bentz was to really address some of those the bottlenecks on the nursery capacity to go plant. We can have all the land in the world and all the landowners show up, but if we don't have the material to plant a trillion trees, is just a number on a piece of paper. And so we really need to look at our nurseries, both public and private, as critical infrastructure to help that component of things. And then one of the things that Christine's group is doing very well, and with what they're trying to do with aggregating existing forest landowners, is also very important. We do that on the reforestation side. We have 600 different landowners. They participate in a variety of USDA programs. They're receiving private finance. So we very much believe in this public-private partnership model. And we very much believe that the only way you can get to scale is getting down to that small landowner. In our case, our smallest landowner is 7 acres. Our largest is 2,000, and in total we got 130,000. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, and it needs to scale up at a factor of 15 to 100 times greater than those numbers if we're really going to put a dent in the situation.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think the bottlenecks to scale is something that I think is should be of strong interest to policymakers and many of those who are on the line right now as they consider forthcoming infrastructure plans and a number of other really important policies. Jeremy and Christine, do you have thoughts on this as well, on what other challenges you see from your perspectives on scaling?
Go ahead, Christine.
Okay. Sorry, Jeremy.
Nope, you're good.
Yes, thank you. So one other thing I just wanted to reiterate that Chandler talked about was, I really like how he talked about this as and plus, right? So we know from recent research that there's a very substantial role for natural climate solutions in providing an opportunity for us to actually stay and achieve our 1.5 degree warming pathway. But you hear the conversations talk about wedges, right? Natural climate solutions are just one of several wedges which get us to that ultimate goal. And one of the other things, within natural climate solutions, of course, forests in particular, which is my area for focus and Chandler's and Jeremy's as well. But forests can play a really contributing role. But it's important to realize, particularly in the US, that 36% of our nation's forests are owned by small individual family landowners. And what we've seen actually in building our program, the Family Forest Carbon Program, is that it's really challenging. It's important work, but it's certainly challenging to aggregate all of these small landowners and these climate-friendly practices. And the most important bottleneck that we've seen is that we have a real need to finance these projects at the outset, because we only actually experience a monetizable benefit later on in the project period. So we're trying to seek a source of low-cost capital, and investors who are interested in these investments are looking for de-risked investments, which is challenging to provide for a new program, a startup program, and something based in natural climate solutions, et cetera. So this is actually where we see a role for the government, where they can step in and de-risk these investments through various credit enhancement options via a loan or a bond guarantee. And there is actually some legislation that's being discussed right now. So that's pretty exciting to think about a potential solution to that specific bottleneck.
Yep, completely agree with those two highlights from Chandler and Christine. I think the other layers I'd add on to that is also then as we're paying for practices and financing the activities and paying for the supply chain infrastructure, how then are we managing accounting, not just from energy sources, but from land use sources at a larger landscape level across the country? And how are we verifying that impact, not just the carbon sequestration impact, but the enhancements to biodiversity, enhancements to soil, enhancements to rural economies? And that's where I think there's a lot of ground for public sector, private sector collaboration, and able to get efficiencies on verifying these impacts to bring your products and services to market more quickly to meet the rate of scale that we need to be going at.
If I could just add one thing to what Jeremy said, these verifications are very labor intensive. We're going through our 12th verification right now. They take about 6 to 9 months to go through these intensive audits. If I look back over the last, probably 10 or 11 years, I bet you we've spent 70% of that decade in a state of audit. That's not preparing for it. That is actually in a state of audit. And we really need to speed up the mechanisms, and the government has access to some great remote sensing data, some other more enhanced tools that we in the private sector would pay for to have access if there was a way. And the other is all these projects go through a risk buffer analysis, and then you have to set aside. So if you got 1 million tons going through and you get hit with a 20% buffer, then you've got 200,000 tons that you have to put aside that you're no longer monetizing. And that puts pressure on the financing, whether it's an existing forest or a reforestation project. And at $20 a metric ton, that's $4 million of value that's not making it down to the ground. So if the government could use its existing public lands as a backstop to create an insurance mechanism companies like ourselves would be happy to pay that premium so that we could keep those tons, monetize those tons into the private marketplace, and send that cash back down to the landowner. There's a couple of probably 2 or 3 of these bottlenecks that are out there, from finance to nursery and labor to verification and insurance, that really could unlock the velocity in this marketplace and allow us to really start to stretch our legs and run towards that scale.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, I want to dive into the technology piece soon, but first, we actually received a question from our chat box, so thank you. It's anonymous, so I don't know who it is, but it's a good question that I think relates to what we're talking about. It seems that a primary challenge is to consider land use planning within each area, city, county, state, and help guide best practices to balance forests, agriculture, renewable energy, and urban residential use. Are there federal or state guiding principles to help state commerce or other civil planning units consider this balance in tandem with economies? Can we work on that with climate, forest, population, and agriculture science? So thank you, Anonymous. Curious to see which panelist wants to take this one.
I can start on that, and others can chime in. I think there's lots of tools out there. There's a reforestationhub.org, which the Nature Conservancy and American Forest put together, which really goes through and it delineates the different areas where there's reforestation opportunities. I know, for example, we worked with some of the land grant colleges to look at what are the lands that are within 300 feet or so of a perennial stream that flows into the Chesapeake Bay, just in Virginia, for example. And what we found that was an ag or of some type, that when you start to look at those areas, which are usually wet, hard to farm, where the tractor has to go zig and zag, which costs the farmer money, those are low-hanging fruits where reforestation activities can be done. It also gives you a big bang for your buck, in the sense that you're creating wildlife corridors, you're cleaning up the water, and you're cleaning up and purifying the air at the same time. But Christine probably has some thoughts as well on that.
Yeah, I can, excuse me, I can jump in following that, Chandler. I would say in our work, how we consider where we target landowners and the larger geographies that we work. I mean, we're certainly looking at places in the landscape that would have the greatest carbon benefit for stewarding and working with those particular landowners. So I would say we are doing landscape planning writ large as it relates to the forest ecosystem that we're working within. But I do think that there's probably more opportunity to collaborate across land use types, certainly, and even with non-traditional or in my view, non-traditional kind of agricultural use, right? So I don't know, Jeremy, if you're familiar with anything more specific, any more specific land use planning policies that might provide good examples for this.
Yeah, Christine, I think what we've seen too is, from some of the Nature Conservancy studies as well, is showing that the most, potential right now for restoring forests is in the south central part of the U.S. along the Mississippi River Alluvial Valley, where Chandler and Green Trees are already working, and in the Northeast. Generally, the eastern half of the country is where the most potential exists for improved forest management, and afforestation, reforestation are two biggest U.S.-based potential of all the natural climate solutions. And so I think from an economic standpoint, from a financing standpoint, it makes sense to start there first, where we get the biggest bang for our buck. And then we continue to reinvest and expand as these markets develop over time into other landscapes. And thinking about ways of combining market-based solutions and non-market-based solutions together. I mean, in out west in California, we're suffering from some of the worst fires ever. And so we can't overlook those challenges as we look at the broader needs across the whole country, and thinking about better planning mechanisms, see the broader system, like I opened in my opening comments, because I think, again, like technologies and know-how exists. It's just kind of how we layer these things together to kind of help us go at the pace we need to be going to act not only on the nature of problems, but also helping people in the meantime.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and that's actually, we have time for one question, and I think it's follows very nicely your last observations, Jeremy. I'd love to talk about the technology of trees. We heard Congressman Thompson talk a lot about this during his opening remarks. I'm personally fascinated to learn about how innovative the forestry space is, in particular in the areas in which you guys work. In the few minutes that we have left, and unfortunately I have to wrap soon, would love to share a little bit more about how how you see innovation in this area.
Yeah, I can start if that's all right, gentlemen. So I would say that technology innovations in this space are really important. And I just want to differentiate that there's opportunity for both traditional technology innovation, but then also kind of program design and carbon accounting innovation, and all of which can work together to provide us with kind of a higher integrity benefit, which overall I think benefits everyone. So I see technology innovations and some of the things that Chandler talked about previously. The remote sensing data has come a tremendous way. Some of the other kind of data sources have really just made leaps and bounds over the past couple of years, and that's been huge. And I think those help us better quantify and measure the carbon benefit, and also picking up on another one of Chandler's points, can help us streamline the verification process, because he certainly has a lot of experience and in this, as he just pointed out, but that can be a really onerous, long process, which is really costly and can actually mean that we can't bring these opportunities at scale in the way that we would otherwise like to. But then again, just to reiterate, I think there is an opportunity for innovation sort of outside of technology when we think about how we're designing our programs and how we're approaching the carbon accounting, and even some of the research on critical things like leakage, additionality, and permanence. Like there's still a lot of innovation needed in those space, which will collectively advance forest carbon projects and the carbon benefit that we achieve from these projects.
Great. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. Would love to hear. I think we could talk about this forever, but we have to wrap it here. Thank you very much to our panelists, Christine, Jeremy, Chandler, for sharing your insights with us today. I certainly learned a lot and hope that our Capitol Hill audience did as well. Many thanks to Congressman Thompson for joining us in the beginning of our program, and for all the work that he's doing on the Hill. As always, if there's feel free to those listening in, feel free to reach out to us at ICCF for any questions, or to our panelists. I'm very happy to connect folks. So we'll look forward to seeing everyone at a future briefing, and are grateful to everyone's time today. Thank you.